So, good morning, everyone. Bonjour.
Bonjour tout le monde. Madame la coordonnatrice, je pense que nous avons bel et bien le quorum, alors on commence. Bonjour. Merci d'être là aujourd'hui. Bienvenue à cette réunion du comité de vérification, réunion virtuelle. N'oubliez pas de garder vos micros en sourdine jusqu'à ce que je vous donne la parole. Et si vous voulez prendre la parole, membre du comité ou membre du conseil, veuillez utiliser la main levée. Vous savez où elle se trouve, au bas de l'écran, près des contrôles audio. Carole, la coordonnatrice, merci à vous et votre équipe de votre bon travail. Et je surveillerai pour ces mains levées et vous avez 5 minutes pour parler. Il y a quelques instants, Carole a confirmé que nous n'avions pas d'intervenants du public, d'inscrits. J'imagine que ça n'a pas changé. Les membres du public sont toujours invités à fournir des commentaires écrits qui seront distribués à tous les membres du conseil. Donc, la réunion est diffusée en direct sur YouTube. Carole, appel nominal formel, s'il vous plaît.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Dadouz.
I'm here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Here.
Vice Chair Meehan.
I'm here.
Et le président, vous avez quorum.
Merci, Carole. And so just a couple of opening remarks. Again, welcome. Bienvenue à la réunion. We have regular business to deal with today and 4 items on the agenda. Le premier point à l'ordre est le rapport de la vérificatrice générale sur la ligne directe de fraude et d'abus.
Report of the Auditor General on the fraud and waste line. We have a 10-minute presentation. The committee members can ask their questions at the end of the presentation.
Information is confidential, and so the AG won't be able to get into much more specific detail than she does in her report. Our second item will be the audit of the zero-emission buses, and Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein will have a brief 10-minute presentation. Following that presentation, the Office of the Auditor General will take questions from committee members, followed by questions to staff. And we have no delegations, but we'll certainly be able to receive questions from committee members. La dernière vérification est le plan de développement et de renouvellement de logements communautaires d'Ottawa.
And then we have the audit of Ottawa Community Housing Development Renewal Plan.
Report is being presented to committee for information only. If members have some questions, we can take them. We'll go through the consent agenda in a few moments to see if that's the case. But the report has been shared with OCH Board of Directors. Et pour terminer, la vérificatrice générale nous fournira une mise à jour verbale.
The Auditor General will give us an oral update on the progress made.
Have changed, not always changing.
As you know, the procedures have changed, and the auditor will give us an update.
We could start the meeting. Any declarations of interest? Seeing, hearing none. Confirmation of minutes from our meeting
Chair.
on December 3rd.
Chair.
Yes, Councillor Kavanagh.
I don't think it's a conflict of interest, but I should mention that for Ottawa Community Housing that I am on the board as well.
Thank you for that. So you have been briefed on this report, I believe, as part of your board. I don't believe that is a conflict in any way. If there's anyone from the clerk's office have you connected with the clerk's office to see if there was any reason you could not participate fully in this meeting?
I don't believe there's an issue.
Did not.
But
Anybody from the clerk's office? I'm not seeing. Mr. O'Connor, hello.
Morning, Mr. Chair. While we would normally leave the Integrity Commissioner to answer these types of questions, the member is correct. It is not a conflict of interest under the legislation in this matter. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. And so noting there are no declarations of interest, confirmation of minutes for the December 3rd meeting. Can I have a?
confirmed.
Madam Vice Chair, thank you. Confirmed. Good. And so we are on item number 1, the 2021 report on the fraud and waste hotline. There is a presentation. And so we will hold that item. Item number 2, the report on the zero emission buses. There is a presentation and we will hold that item. Item number 3, the report of the audit of Ottawa Community Housing Development and Renewal Plan. There is no presentation. We do have Donna Gray and Saeed Sayah available to ask questions. Do any members of the committee or of council who might be present have questions on item number 3? Councillor Kavanagh, you do? Very well. So we will hold that item. And item number 4, verbal status update of the OEG's progress in reviewing outstanding recommendation. And there is a presentation. So all items will be held. Back to number 1. So presentation by the Office of the Auditor General. I believe Madame Goujon is going to lead this item. Over to you.
Merci beaucoup. Carole, si tu peux partager la présentation, s'il te plaît. Merci. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Permettez-moi de vous
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Please, I'd like to present to you the annual report of 2021 on the fraud and waste hotline. So on behalf of the Auditor General Office, I'd like to acknowledge the Office of the City Manager, Management, and staff of their continued cooperation and assistance. I'd also like to thank my staff, especially Ed Miner, Assistant Auditor General, who has a very important contribution to our office and is oversight of this hotline, fraud and waste hotline, throughout the year.
On behalf of the Office of the Auditor General, I would like to express our appreciation for the continued cooperation and assistance from the City Manager's Office, management, and staff. I would also like to thank my team for their continued efforts in this area. Specifically, I would like to thank Deputy Auditor General Ed Miner, whom has now retired, for his ongoing contributions to the office and oversight of the Fraud and Waste Hotline program in 2021 and throughout his tenure. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Since 2005, my office has administered the city's fraud and waste program. The primary objective of the program is to provide a means to employees and the public to confidentially and anonymously report activities or conducts related to or involving city personnel, resources, operations, or vendors for which they suspect instances of fraud or waste. The Fraud and Waste Program is governed by the Fraud and Waste Policy, which sets out the responsibilities of the Auditor General, city staff, and managers. The policy applies to all city employees with the following exceptions: councillors and their office staff, the Ottawa Police Services, Ottawa Public Health, Ottawa Public Library, and the Ottawa Community Housing Corporation. First and foremost, all city staff are responsible for reporting violations of fraud and waste as outlined in the Fraud and Waste Policy and in accordance with the city's Employee Code of Conduct. When an allegation is received through the hotline, my office first assesses the allegation's merit and determines whether my office or management is best suited to complete an investigation. For reports that we forward to management for investigation, we are provided with the outcome of their investigation, as well as any remedial action and related discipline to be taken. The OAG provides an independent oversight of management's investigations, as well as the adequacy of future mitigation measures and the sufficiency of management's corrective actions to diminish or prevent future risks. Any reports investigated by my office will either result in a report to committee and council or a management letter provided to management. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. As I verbally reported at our last meeting, the volume of reports received in 2021 was significant. We received a total of 575 reports this year. 301 reports were unique in nature, and 274 reports are what we are calling similar in nature. These 301 unique reports made to the Fraud and Waste Hotline represent a 48% increase compared to 2021. It's roughly, as you can see in the chart, over 100 more cases than the previous 3 years. The total number of reports made in 2021, so taking that 575 number of reports that we received, represents a 182% increase from the previous year. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. This slide depicts the results of all reports investigated in 2021. Investigation results are categorized into 5 groups. Substantiated. These are allegations found to be accurate and that constitute fraud or waste. Accurate but compliant are allegations that were found accurate through the course of an investigation but do not constitute fraud or waste. Inaccurate cases are, as the name suggests, allegations that are proven through the course of an investigation to be inaccurate. Allegations classified as not applicable are not applicable to the city's fraud and waste policy. And lastly, allegations classified as having insufficient information are either unclear or lack information for us to investigate. Which such cases, we always go back to the reporter seeking additional information. However, they may not respond or they may not have additional information to provide to us to allow us to move forward with an investigation. During 2021, we closed a total of 302 reports, of which 121 were investigated. Of these 121 investigated reports, 31 were substantiated, 58 were accurate but compliant, and 32 were inaccurate. The 31 reports substantiate equate to 26% of all investigated reports that were closed this year. What is very important to note is while we received significantly more cases in 2021, the number of substantiated reports is similar to previous years. In 2020, there were 27 substantiated cases, 45 in 2019, and 27 in 2018. While allegations ran the gamut in 2021, we noted a few such themes, including abuse of time, inappropriate use of city vehicles and equipment, and lastly, we did note a few cases of COVID-related allegations, which included not masking or falsifying vaccination receipts. It is important to note where reports are found to be substantiated, any disciplinary action that is taken is a responsibility of management. The existence of the city's fraud and waste program discourages those that may be considering unethical, fraudulent, or wasteful activities and prevents future losses. This year, reports have assisted management in strengthening the city's control environment and serve to improve the city's operations. The program fosters a workplace that encourages and protects those that come forward with a complaint by maintaining their anonymity. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît, Carole. Merci. Nous tâchons toujours d'améliorer
We're
continuellement.
always trying to constantly improve the process of the hotline. This is why I will work this year with the city manager in order to have this program better known to the employees and the public.
Improve the fraud and waste hotline process. As such, this year, I will be working in conjunction with the city manager on ways to increase awareness of the program to both staff and members of the public. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Merci de votre attention. J'ai terminé mon exposé.
Thank you for your attention. I'm done with my presentation and I'll be pleased to answer your questions. Thank you so much, Madam Auditor General.
Councillor Elwood-Perry's hand came up. Councillor. I don't know if I've frozen. Councillor, can you?
It's
Go ahead.
Enchanté. I had my hand up.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Auditor. So obviously, when you show the slide, I don't want you to put it back on. I still have, I remember the increase in 2021. Can you just give us a little bit, as much as detail you can? Is this from different individual, or some of it is group? Because sometimes we hear an individual can make as many calls or as many. So is it from different group, small group, large group? Can you talk about this?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Chair, what's important to note is, as I had mentioned, any report that's made through the Fraud and Waste Hotline is an anonymous report. While the reporter can provide us, for example, an email address, we wouldn't necessarily have access to being able to see what that email address is. So I would not be able to state of any particular nature whether it's coming from an individual, multiple individuals, a group of individuals. We'd likely be speculating. So for those 301 cases, I would state I cannot make any specific claim on whether or not there's particular individuals having repeat reports.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that question, Councillor El-Shantir. And just a reminder, and if Madame Goujon wants to comment, the intake for the Fraud and Waste Hotline is not in the Auditor General's office. Is that correct? Can you confirm that, Madame AG?
Chair, yes, that is correct. So there is both a hotline that you can call as well as a website that you can go to provide feedback. Now, there are instances where we may receive complaints or reports directly through our office that get added into our tally that you see here, or in some cases, management will bring something to our attention that's been brought to their attention. But generally speaking, the majority of the cases will either come through the hotline itself or through the online intake portal.
And it is anonymous and separate from the AG's office.
Yes, that is correct. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kavanagh, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the report. It's always an interesting one, and it obviously was affected by the pandemic, wouldn't you say? Does that seem to be the reason why we jump so high in calls?
Thank you for your question, Councillor and Chair. I'd be speculating if I really stated anything. As I mentioned last year, my assumption is that the pandemic likely is having an impact, but usually for us auditors, in order to determine a trend or a pattern of some sort, we usually need a good 3 years to determine that. So I think the bigger question would be if we saw a decline after the pandemic, we'd likely be able to conclude.
Okay. I think it's important for people to understand what it means by reports similar in nature. Can you give an example? Like, is everyone reporting about snow removal or something along that line?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Chair, I anticipated this question coming up, and for two reasons, unfortunately, I can't give any additional comment. One, due to obviously the anonymity of individuals that could be reporting through the Fraud and Waste Hotline. And second of all, the investigation on those 274 was not complete as of the end of 2021. So it would be inappropriate for me to comment on that at this time.
Okay, so yeah, I guess it's just a little mysterious when you put it that way. Well, you can understand individual cases, but when you see that number and it says similar in nature, is it all of them are about one thing, or is that they're all duplicates beyond the unique reports?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Chair, what I can state is they are all for the exact same type of situation. I don't want to elaborate too much because of the fact that the investigation hadn't been concluded at the end of 2021, but they are for exact same types of situations, which is why we've classified them as such, because they have been lumped together into one investigation.
Okay. Is it possible to do in camera on these things to find out more if it's helpful to us as members of the committee?
Chair, I think I would have to leave that to the clerk's office to determine. I'd be more than happy to speak in camera.
The anonymity aspect is quite an important aspect of the Fraud and Waste Hotline, and sometimes perhaps even the Auditor General cannot identify some of the individuals. But Councillor Kavanagh, if you have questions, perhaps we could take it offline, or if need be, go in camera. I would look for advice from the AG and from the clerk's office to proceed on that. But
No,
if
I'm
you're
not
okay
trying-
with that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take away from the anonymity. It's more just the nature of the calls or complaints, because I think it's important for us to know if there's one particular thing that keeps getting repeatedly called for. That's what I sort of feel is useful to know. Like it's like somebody, if you had 10,000 signatures on a petition, it's all the same, but they're all for the same reason. So I thought maybe it was it would be useful to know if it's in the same direction. I guess that's what I'm getting at. I'm not trying to take away from the exposing anyone.
Noted. Okay. I think when I read the report, and I've just looked at it, sometimes, and in the report, the confluence had to do with COVID-19. I'm trying to find it again. Madam AG, maybe you can assist me. You had provided a bit of a summary there in that report as to what the nature of it, use and abuse of city assets, some COVID-19 related items. I'm just trying to find it. I can't.
Yeah,
I
in the
can't
report
lay
category.
my eyes on it.
Yeah, I've got it open, and the report
Okay.
unauthorized use of property information and time is 94, and
Yeah.
so that's pretty high. And I think we can imagine that that's related to people working at home, perhaps. But that's what I'm curious about. So it's going forward, what does that mean? But if they're not substantiated, then it's not to worry about.
Okay.
Yeah.
With your permission, Councillor Kavanagh, let's take this offline and see what information or. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, in terms of working from home, I think that's a big category, and because obviously we had to do a lot of it, and we're not the only ones. The federal government too. Are we finding our policies are in line with other governments or major operations that are working from home?
I believe that question would be best directed to management.
And Mr. Chair, yes, we have a work from home policy, Mr. Chair, that was adjusted to reflect people working from home. And we've had training for our supervisors and our managers in terms of monitoring it to ensure that people are actually working from home. There's always going to be a few that slip through and might try to take advantage of it, but that has not been our experience overall based on the 3,000 to 4,000 people who are working at home during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. From my experience working with staff, they're working very, very hard, if anything. So I can vouch for that, the ones that I work with in my office. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Vice Chair Meehan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. AG. Do we know the breakdown of the complaints? Were they primarily from the public, or were they city employees reporting abuse of power from while people are working from home? Do you have that breakdown?
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor. Chair. 2/3 of the reports that were received came from employees, 1/3 came from the public.
Okay. There must be really real challenges in investigating a complaint like that. Is that why most of them are unsubstantiated?
I think in a lot of cases, it depends on each situation. There are instances where, as you can see, we don't receive enough information to be able to investigate. And I think that's one of the largest areas that we tend to fall into. Then we have many cases that are more of just general complaints in nature that aren't necessarily appropriate to the city's fraud and waste policy. So if your garbage didn't get picked up, there's a 311 number to call, and there's other avenues to be able to lodge those types of complaints. And that's part of why we are looking forward to doing an awareness campaign this year, which is to try and inform employees and the public of the various means that they can report different types of issues and really what is meant to come through the fraud and waste hotline. And then there are instances where something may look awry, but at the end of the day, it is something that is permitted. It's sometimes, if it's a member of the public that's seeing something, they may only understand part of the situation that's ongoing. If somebody's taking their vehicle home, that might be a permission that's been provided, for example. And so I think part of it's an education thing is to informing individuals what's appropriate and what's not. And, it's very difficult for everybody in the organization and members of the public to understand all the various policies that are out there and what is permissible.
Okay. Do we know how many employees will be sanctioned as a result of this report?
So in 2021, and my staff can correct me if I'm wrong, there was one terminated individual. There was 3 individuals that resigned, and there was 13 suspensions that were issued.
Great. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Seeing no other questions, that the Audit Committee recommend Council receive the 2021 report on the fraud and waste hotline. Is that carried? Thank you. We're on to item number 2, article numéro 2, report on the audit of zero emission buses. There is a presentation by Madame Goujon and Deputy Auditor General Gorenstein, I believe. And just for the information of our committee members and other council members, Jim Greer, Madame Amilcar is here. I saw her, and I have on my list Dan Villeneuve available to answer questions. So go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you very much. It's Joanne Gorenstein. Could I get the presentation? Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Audit Committee. I am pleased to be here today to present the results of the zero emission buses audit. Our team would like to express our appreciation for the continued cooperation and assistance afforded to us by the City Manager and his office, management, and staff. Next slide, please. As part of the Climate Change Master Plan approved by Council in 2020, the City has undertaken a zero-emission bus transformation to convert its existing fleet to battery-powered buses. On June 23rd, 2021, Council approved the zero-emission buses for OC transfer report, which outlined the plan for the City to enter into a loan agreement with the Canada Infrastructure Bank and to seek additional funding from Infrastructure Canada to gradually convert the bus fleet to battery electric buses. The aim would be to phase in a total of 450 zero-emission buses by 2027 and to have a fully electric bus fleet by 2036. Following direction from the Transit Commission, staff initiated a competitive procurement process to procure 4 battery electric buses for a pilot project. Delivery and pre-inspection of the pilot buses was completed in November 2021, and the pilot buses were added to revenue service earlier this month. Next slide, please. The objective of this audit was to provide reasonable assurance that the City has assessed and considered the technology risks and operational requirements as it selected the technology and vendor, and in developing its plan to evaluate bus performance within its pilot project. The audit sprint, or sprint 1 we're calling it, focused on zero-emission bus technology and performance. This included activities undertaken by the City to assess the various technologies and vendors to meet the City's greenhouse gas emission reduction commitments, and the plans made as of the audit timeframe, which was approximately October 2021, to evaluate the bus technology against operational requirements of the City of Ottawa through its pre-planning and pilot project. Next slide, please. The audit of zero-emission buses leveraged an agile audit approach.
Unlike a traditional audit that focuses more on historical activities, this methodology provides periodic reports performed in iterative cycles or sprints of audit on a continual basis with a focus on areas of greatest risk to the city. The audit aimed to provide independent and objective opinions before key decisions are made and agreements and funding arrangements are signed. It's important to note that the OAG is not advising management. We are auditing work once it has been completed by staff in order to help council make informed decisions. As mentioned, the current audit sprint was focused on zero emission buses technology and performance. Future audit sprints planned include program and stakeholder management, the financial framework, bus operations and testing, and performance management and monitoring. As part of the agile audit approach, proposed audit areas and timing will be reevaluated after each audit sprint to confirm the appropriateness based on the progress of the zero emission bus program and the associated risk landscape. Next slide, please. The audit confirmed that a thorough technical evaluation exercise was conducted as part of the procurement of the 4 pilot buses, where the performance requirements defined for the buses are aligned with key variables and parameters of industry research bodies and a sample of other comparable municipal implementations, including Toronto, Montreal, and Edmonton. Specific findings were brought to management's attention across 4 areas. The first area was business proposition and feasibility. Based on planned procurement timelines, there will not be enough time to implement the 4-bus pilot project across all seasons to assess the results and identify technical findings and recommendations in order to provide input into the procurement of the next group of 74 electric buses planned for mid-2022. The implementation of the next group of zero-emission buses is a large operational task, considering there is limited time to analyze actual performance data related to charging requirements, range, and climate performance from the initial 4 pilot buses. Without sufficient planning time to consider technology, this would be both bus and charging infrastructure, tools, training, route scheduling, garage readiness, and approaches to charging the buses, there's a risk to the successful implementation of the next group of zero-emission buses, which, if continued as planned, will increase the size of the battery electric fleet by a factor of almost 20. It is worth noting that other municipalities expanded their zero-emission bus fleet in smaller increments. For example, Montreal went from an initial 7 buses to 30, and Edmonton procured 40 after their initial pilot exercise. The second area was technology evaluation and testing. While the city and pilot project stakeholders expressed the intention to perform tests and informed the audit team of the potential testing scenarios for the pilot buses, a formal plan or template to test the buses against specific variables, which are also called controlled engineering testing, was not in place during our audit fieldwork. These tools are key to ensuring a proper and fulsome evaluation of the buses and to assist in determining the operational requirements for the City of Ottawa. We would have expected these to have been developed prior to receiving the pilot buses. As we developed the audit report, management informed the audit team that as a result of discussions throughout the course of the audit, an approach had since been created for this controlled engineering testing. Next slide, please. The third area was performance management. While the city will be leveraging sample reports and inform the audit team of their plans to use existing diesel performance matrices, a tailored framework to evaluate the zero emission buses pilot project had not yet been established during the audit fieldwork. This is necessary so that the city can determine what elements are critical and how to monitor them to ensure the pilot buses are operating in line with expectations. During the development of our audit report, management informed us that work had commenced in the development of a zero emission bus performance evaluation report and bus performance evaluation approach. At the time our audit report was drafted, the framework was still under development and specific areas and associated criteria were still being identified. The fourth and final area was project management for the pilot. Although project management was not in scope for this audit sprint, specific opportunities related to the master project schedule and the master risk register were identified as part of the audit, which were raised to management for timely resolution. These best practices support the achievement of pilot objectives and support a foundation for the broader zero emission buses program. During the development of our audit report, management indicated that work to develop and improve these project management tools had begun. In the end, a total of 5 recommendations were made to management, who agreed with all of them. Next slide, please. This concludes my presentation. I would be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation, members of the committee. Councillor Kavanagh, please.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the information. This is a bit different because it's not looking at past practices. It's forward thinking. So we're working just with a pilot project that was very recent and trying to make decisions about the future. And as we've learned, it's really important to get it right because you're stuck with them for a while. But one of the things that crossed my mind when I'm looking at this and the recommendations is how technology keeps changing. The electric bus of 2 years ago is not the same as the electric bus of today. They keep changing as well and getting modified. And how does that fit in?
Thank you for the question. Chair, I might actually suggest maybe that management is best positioned to answer this question because they are so familiar, much more familiar with the technology.
Correct. Thank you.
May I, Chair?
Merci, oui.
Thank you, Councillor. I will speak French because I will have so many things to say, so it will be better for us. C'est une très bonne question.
And I will remind everyone that the simultaneous translation is available.
Correct. Merci.
Yes, thank you. Well, in terms of technology, what we're seeing really is that technology, electric bus technology is moving very, very quickly. This is happening across the world. What we saw 2 years ago is very different to what we see today, be it in terms of batteries. Batteries only had a range of 100 kilometers in the past. Now, with the same batteries, we're able to do 500 kilometers. So that's a huge improvement. In the past, we saw a trend towards rapid charging, where buses would be recharged at several every certain number of stops. Now what we're seeing really is a move to slow charging in the depots, and that allows us to extend the range to up to 300 and 350 kilometers. Of course, it depends on the season. It depends on whether you're in the winter, in the summer, or whether you're using the heating or the cooling systems on the bus as well. Heating for electric buses is still diesel run. Now, this technology is important. And in the audit, what we've seen is that people have started looking at what type of technology to use, slow or rapid charging. So we've been able to leverage what's already been done to move forward with depot-based charging, slow charging. I think that's the right decision. So what people have done in the past has been able to be leveraged. Thank you.
Merci.
Any other questions?
Are you asking? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Councillor Kavanagh, do you have any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Or a follow-up?
Yeah, I am interested in the heating of the buses, and I understand that that's diesel, and that's a technology that keeps evolving, because I understand that, of course, with our winters, we need the heat in the buses, and I just wonder how that is affecting our decisions as well. For example, the pilot buses that we have now and what's available for the future. Is that technology evolving?
Merci, conseiller.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. Well, all the buses have a tank so that they can actually use their heating systems. Otherwise, the batteries would run down so quickly that we wouldn't have enough range for the buses.
Okay, and is that related to the heating system? Okay. My other question is in relation to the funds that we got from the federal government to purchase these buses. How is there a time limit? Because if we're stretching it out, slowing down the purchasing to make sure that we're doing it more gradually, how does that affect our funding? I wasn't sure what the funding arrangement was in terms of if we had to spend it by a certain time.
Merci, conseillère.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor. I'll start answering, and if my colleague from Finance is there, I would ask her to add extra information. Well, we've received money from Infrastructure Canada. Until we get that money, we won't be able to move forward with the project. So the longer it takes to get that money, the longer it'll take to actually implement the electric bus pilot project. But we have been in touch with them, but we're only allowed to buy electric buses using that money. So that means that we won't be able to buy diesel buses with that money. I know that the Auditor General is concerned by the fact that we're moving forward too quickly. I've tried to reassure her that we'll take the necessary time to undertake a pilot project, and that'll be very, very important to do that. That's why it's important that Infrastructure Canada free up this money quickly. And we've had communications with them, which seem to show that they're intending to do that. Thanks, Ms. Amilcar.
Stephenson has jumped on. Can you comment on the financing impacts of this, Madam Treasurer?
Well, thank you very much, Councillor, and thanks for the opportunity to add to Ms. Amilcar's answer. When the program was launched, I want to say about 6 months ago or so, the federal government was open to what they call an expression of interest for applications, so not a full application process. And the project team has put an expression of interest in. Since then, an announcement was made to actually open up the program for full funding. So we're working through that right now in terms of getting our final application in. And we're going through a due diligence process in terms of getting our financing model in place, looking at all of the costs, the timing, how long the program is going to run, and then align our purchasing with that. So we're just working through all of those details at this point in time and trying to align our program with what the federal government is offering.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Thank you for asking the questions that I had on my list. That's good. Councillor Hubley, Chair of the Transit Commission, please.
Thank you, Chair. A few questions on this. Appreciate the audit, for sure. As residents would know, we didn't have a good experience with the first version of hybrid buses. So I don't think it's any secret that I had a lot of concerns with going ahead with this project, given the initial experience. But as was laid out by Wendy and others at the time at council, this was a deal being offered by the federal government for the first municipality that was willing to take on a big purchase of electric buses. So we didn't have a lot of time here. And if we said no, that would be fine. We could continue on with the pilot project and make a decision later, but it would cost taxpayers more. So I'll be the first to say it's a bit of a gamble to get this done without the pilot, but there was huge financial incentives to go ahead with it. So my question to this is, how far into testing or doing the original pilot plan to check these buses will we be before we have to start making the big purchases?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Mr. Chair. Well, the first thing I'd like to say really is what we're currently doing with the pilot project is, well, in Montreal, they have 30 of these buses, and we'll be able to leverage their experience. We're already talking to them, and they'll be able to leverage our experience as well. And when we go to the call for tenders, if a different manufacturer gets or wins the bid, we might have to undertake a different pilot project. I think in terms of the batteries, the conclusions will be the same. But we do have to see how other manufacturers adapt. The technology will take us a minimum of 6 months, if not more, to test these new vehicles. But if it's the same vehicle we're using now, with the experience we're gaining and with the experience of other colleagues, that'll help us to be ready sooner to buy a larger number of buses. As a conclusion, I would say, however, that over and above testing vehicles and testing the technology, we also have to be able to test how we'll be able to plan on a daily basis with a 100% electric fleet. That's something we have to look into. So as soon as we have enough buses, we'll be able to actually test that notion at that point.
Okay, and we've had them on the road now here in Ottawa for more than a month. Correct, Ms. Amilcar? And what are we seeing so far? Are they performing well? You know, in the extreme cold, we're having a great winter for testing vehicles in Ottawa weather because we've had the extreme cold, we've had the major snow dumps. How have these buses performed in those conditions?
Well, starting at the end of January, we've had the pleasure of running electric buses. We have one for training purposes, another one which is used within the depot for training, and the others are working very, very well. There's one we have an issue with, but it's always great to be able to say that during the pilot projects, that's when you want to actually see the issues. But up to now, their performance has been very, very good. However, we're going to have to wait another 2 or 3 months before any real conclusions about the reliability can actually be made.
Okay, so in the extreme colds, for example, do we know how badly that depleted the battery? Are we watching that? Like we expected to get several hundred kilometers on a charge so that these buses could be used on at least our smaller routes right now. Are we seeing, I think you mentioned you have 2 that are on the road now. How did those batteries perform during the days that were more than minus 25?
Well, thank you very much for that, for the time being. The results are very, very good. We do have one bus that we do have some issues with. I haven't yet analyzed all the metric data. Jim's here. Perhaps he has additional information. Perhaps you could add extra information.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. What I can tell you is that we've ran these buses in many different weather events. Recently, they've been out in minus 26-degree weather. The range was 314 kilometers. So our test range and expectations were 250 kilometers. So they exceeded our test range. We put approximately 17,000 kilometers in engineering testing so far since October. They have been performing well, but there are many parallel things happening at the same time, which we have 4 buses in service. 2 of them generally we have out in our engineering testing. However, we do have warranty repairs that come up that need to be addressed. We also have a large training program going on, but in that short period of time since October, they've been performing very well, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Maybe what we can do is at a future transit meeting, come back with more of the detailed answers as to how this is going. I just want to provide some context here for what we're looking for out of the pilot project is these kinds of metrics, how good they're performing in the extremes. You know, hopefully this summer we get some really nice hot days that we can see it there, because it's not just the diesel motor for the heater, there's also the AC that will run the batteries down quick, and we got to see what that does to our delivery. So I think that'll, one last question on the audit piece. There's a recommendation here to consider reducing the number of buses planned to be procured. Perhaps Wendy may have the answer to this. I think we're locked in. There's a certain date there that we have to spend that money in order to get all that money. So there isn't a whole lot of leeway to defer the purchases. Am I correct, Wendy?
There is a time frame associated with the program offered by the federal government, so we do have to adhere to the time frame as we roll this out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Madam Auditor General and Chair. That'll be my questions on the audit piece.
Yes, and Councillor Meehan, I saw the Auditor General had raised her hand, so just before we go to your questions, Madame Goujon.
Thank you. I just wanted to perhaps clarify a few items, specifically with regards to the timeline, Councillor Hubley, that you just mentioned. As Madame Amilcar just mentioned, no agreements have been signed to date. So that timeline that was established with Council back in the summer, there's obviously been some time saving with the fact that the federal government hasn't moved forward with the program. That's, I think, one piece that's really important to note. So I think the city is able to essentially buy a little time with that to implement this pilot project and to gather those learnings. And what our recommendation with regards to slowing down doesn't mean not achieving the total number of purchases by the end date that Council has established. What we're trying to, if I may be so bold as say, forewarn management is the importance of appropriate planning with these types of massive transformations that are going on. And I think that's a key element that I want to make sure is clearly understood here. We want to help management be set up for success. We want the city to have this great transformation and to be able to meet those sustainable development goals that have been established by Council. So I think it's just really important to highlight that piece, that while this recommendation is asking management to slow down and to reconsider a smaller purchase for their next purchase after the pilot project, does not mean that they would not be able to achieve their goals, and does not necessarily mean that they would have to purchase more diesel buses. My understanding is that they can continue to maintain some of the diesel buses to prolong the life cycle of those particular buses. So I just wanted to add that piece to ensure that that was clearly understood what our recommendation was trying to achieve.
Thank you, Madam AG. Councillor Hubley, you're satisfied? Good, thank you. Vice Chair Meehan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Joanne, for the report and for the recommendations. I just wanted to follow up something that the Treasurer had mentioned, that there is a time frame that the federal government had set out in order for us to purchase the buses. The amount of money that we've got, do we know exactly how many buses we can purchase with the amount of money that they're giving the city?
I'm going to defer that to Madame Amilcar, if that's okay.
Absolument, merci.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor. Well, it really depends on the cost of the bus. It depends on the program, how Infrastructure Canada applies its program. 100% for the deposit. What I'm hearing now is 40% would be subsidized, and the other share would be raised through the infrastructure bank. And the cost of diesel buses that we normally buy. So we would have to turn to the infrastructure bank to fund this. Our intention is to buy around 27 buses. We're currently using diesel buses, which are coming to the end of the life cycle. Now, if we don't buy the electric buses, we're going to have to keep those diesel buses, and that means that we'll have to provide for a program to extend the life cycle of those diesel buses to take it beyond the 15 years we normally keep them running. This is the challenge that we're facing if we don't get the money quickly enough. And also, if the technology does not provide or allow us to make that transition.
Okay, I think I understood that. I've always, I am for diesel buses. I think that the city needs them, but I'm always been a little bit concerned about putting our eggs all in one basket. So I guess my question is, are there any recommendations into staging and keeping some of our diesel buses in the event that, you know, we have issues with the electric buses? And one thing we didn't follow up on is when Mr. Greer, and I think, I can't remember who else, but said there was an issue with one of the buses that's in the pilot right now. I'm just wondering what that issue is. Can someone just shed some light on what we're dealing with? Is it a battery? Is it something else?
That was a general manager who said that there was an issue with one of the electric buses.
What is the issue, I guess?
Jim, go ahead, please. You can
I can take that question there, Councillor. The issue is right now is we're identifying there's an interface issue between the battery and the actual charging station. So it is. So New Flyer is trying to determine right now. We noticed it when the bus was going for a charge. It wasn't giving a full charge, and it seems to be an interface issue, but it's definitely being looked at by the New Flyer warranty field reps, and they're going to get back to us with more details on that.
So just the one bus?
Yes.
The other one, the 3 other buses had no problems with the interface?
No, they've been performing well. One of the buses has been working well with our training department, where we've been doing operator training and technical training. The other ones we were using for commissioning the new pantographs that were installed for helping out with some of the commissioning of the infrastructure. And one's obviously been out doing the engineering testing, covering quite a bit of mileage. So 2 buses are generally always out in service at any given time. Just we happen to notice this one problem that didn't look right. So we contacted New Flyer and they're reviewing it. We noticed that on late Thursday afternoon.
So the buses that are in the pilot project right now, they're single unit buses, right? They're just if they're not the articulated buses, they're single buses.
That's correct. They're 40-foot buses.
So the 40-foot buses, do we have a plan to have an articulated bus, an electric batteried articulated bus? We have a lot of articulated buses in the system right now for capacity. When are we going to launch a pilot for those buses, or are we going to?
We will. Well, go ahead. Sorry, Renee. Go ahead.
Thank you. Merci, conseillère.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor. The technology for articulated buses is not ready. We don't have any manufacturers really who have electric articulated buses. So for the time being, we'll be focusing on the 40-foot buses. And of course, and eventually in the future, we will have a call for tender for articulated buses,
one of the big storms we had this past winter, we saw our articulated buses, a lot of them stuck in snowbanks, stuck on roads. And if you talk to the drivers, as I have, the articulated buses are not built to handle the snow in the city. I'm wondering if like those are, if we don't have the articulated buses going to be tested right now, or we're not going to have them part of our pilot project, how are we going to deal with the capacity issues? Because capacity will grow again. So what's the plan there?
Well, we have started thinking about that because the articulated buses are coming to the end of their life cycles before the 40-foot buses, and we're looking at buying the 40-foot buses right now. So we're looking at this issue with the planning and engineering teams to see how we can replace a couple of articulated buses with the 40-foot buses and perhaps keep some articulated buses longer than planned. Then this is a combination that will allow us to make the tech transition without having articulated buses. Now, given the reality we're facing, what we've seen with COVID-19, unfortunately, we know that passenger habits will change. We're looking at how we may be able to reduce the number of articulated buses so that we can focus on 40-foot buses. If we want the same number of capacity, we're going to need to buy more 40-foot buses to replace the articulated buses. We'll need more drivers and all the rest. So we have to be very, very careful, and we're doing that analysis right now.
Okay. I guess that goes to my next question, is the cost comparison between electric buses and the diesel buses that we currently have. The cost comparison, I think, is something we really have to be serious about. So we don't see a cost comparison yet. Is it too early to consider that? I'm talking about the cost of the charging stations, the cost of the batteries, the cost of recycling the batteries, all of that. Will we have a cost analysis?
I'll start, Wendy. This is also something that we are working with Deloitte, the financial aspect. But until we test them, it will be a little more difficult. But we know, for instance, what happens with the diesel. But it's a little too soon now to know exactly the cost and what we can save. But we know in theory that the electric buses should cost less in maintenance than the diesel buses.
If I may add to that, Councillor, just to provide a little bit more around the financial piece to it. That is the work that we are doing now that Ms. Amilcar spoke to. That's the due diligence in terms of that overall financial model that we're putting together. So that this is really, in essence, the beauty of the program that the CIB is offering to us. They are allowing us to borrow the money, which is basically the differential between the cost of the diesel and the electric bus at an extremely low interest rate, which is 1%. And we are only required to pay that back with the savings that we have as a result of it. So when we come back with our final report and plan to move forward, we will outline what that analysis looks like. So you'll have the full picture in front of you in terms of this making sense.
Okay. And I guess I'll just wrap up by saying, going forward, we have to be cognizant, I think, really careful about the reliability of the buses that we purchase. Just as an example, when I was in a newsroom and all of a sudden we decided everything we got from typewriters. For those of you who don't know what a typewriter is, it's pretty manual. Got a typewriter and we changed over to computer technology. And when everything went down, there's only a few of us that realized that we had typewriters in a back cupboard and had to pull them out to do the job. So my concern is putting our eggs all in one basket. This is Ottawa. We're the nation's capital. We're winter. We've seen the challenges that we have with articulated buses in snowstorms. I think that it might be prudent to really seriously stagger this program, to continue to go with diesel for as long as we possibly can as backup. So I think I'll just leave that for now, but I would hope that that is going to be a recommendation. And the recommendation to go slower now, I'm gratified to see that. We've got to do this right. This is a major purchase and a major change. We've got to do it right. So is this recommendation, Ms. AG, that this will go to council like most of the other recommendations, correct?
Chair, that is correct, yes. So obviously the report will be provided to council, I believe, at the March 9th meeting for approval of the recommendations. And also, Councillor Meehan, just to give you a little additional reassurance, our next sprint will look at the financial model that's being assembled. So looking at the costing and looking at a little bit of the link with regards to the Canadian Infrastructure Bank loan and repayments. There's conditions linked. There will be conditions linked in those agreements with a little bit of the costing and the revenues that are going to be earned from those particular buses once they come into service. So that's something that we're going to be looking at in our next sprint.
Great.
But as you mentioned, I do think what we're asking management to do is to take the time to plan, to take in the learnings that they're getting from the pilot project, and as you just mentioned, Councillor Meehan, to take it slow. Essentially, what we're looking for is that they have a slow transition with these new buses. It continues to allow them to take in the learnings, and that way the impact that could happen on ridership is lower.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is pivotal. It's really pivotal because we're going to see major changes in the way that people utilize transit in the city going forward. So purchasing buses with maybe past data may not be the wisest thing. Things, we'll need more community busing. We're going to need more busing on demand eventually. So I just want everyone to be cognizant of that and to not rush forward simply because the feds are giving us money, because ultimately this will be a cost that's borne down the line by taxpayers. So that's it for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And you're absolutely right that, and Councillor Kavanagh, I do see your hand. If I could have 30 seconds, the full life cycle cost, and you mentioned recycling batteries and the fixed cost of setting up the charging stations at 1,500 cents and all of that, amortized over a certain expected number of buses are all financial costs. Always keeping that in mind with our other strategic objectives of reducing our GHGs in our city and all of that.
We may not need a 40-foot bus in some of the communities to do community busing. We may be putting in an order for, I don't know, a regular bus.
Yeah, and we will leave that to the planners at OC Transpo to, as you mentioned, articulated buses and the impact of weather on their performance and the demand that we're going to see in the next couple of years. There's a lot of work to do.
And I think we have to also welcome the input of the drivers in this, because they're the ones who are dealing with trying to get those articulated buses out of snowbanks and up roads. And I think we have to ask for their assistance and their experience with the buses. I think that we have to, that would be doing due diligence as well. So, just hopefully management will take that into account. So thanks.
Indeed, a lot of input, a lot of perspectives. Councillor Kavanagh, please. On round two, I believe, but I see no other hands. So Councillor Kavanagh.
Merci beaucoup. Dans cet audit, Montréal est
in this audit, you use Montreal as an example for the bus purchase program. Mrs. Amilcar, could you explain your experience with electronic buses in Montreal? Thank you, Councillor. First, in 2017, Montreal purchased 3 electric buses with quick recharge, because back then we thought it was the future. That is, we could use those buses at any time. We just had to stop at charging station every now and then, and they could do 20 kilometers easy, then get charged for 2 minutes and be ready to go for another 20 minutes. It was a new bus, a new pilot project in partnership with Hydro-Quebec, Eurobus, and Montreal. And in front of the results that were quite interesting, and following discussions with my colleagues at the International Union of Transit System, we knew that everyone had to convert towards electric buses. Everybody started working on that, having pilot projects. And that's when we thought we should try something else than quick recharge buses. And that's how we end up with these buses, and it's New Flyers who got this order. It's interesting because we could have a pilot with two different builders, but for two totally different technologies. So we were able to buy from BOYD minibuses that are also electric, but we wanted to be able to try everything possible. I know that these buses are been in operation since last fall, a little bit before OC Transpo with New Flyers in Montreal, and that's why we can now share our information. So, and I insist on this, electric technology is new. It's everybody knows it. When I was in Montreal, I worked a lot with builders, constructors. We were developing the technology with them, kind of. It was one of the first company asking for slow charging buses so that we could recharge not only on the side, but differently. So use the quick charge technology for the slow charge. So we're just developing this technology now. So that's why there's a lot of prudence required. But at the same time, we have to do this for the planet. We must change the green gas emission, and the public transit will be a great help. So my colleagues at the international level and my old employer in the city of Montreal recognize that. That's what forced us to go towards this new technology. Councillor, you're on mute.
You're good, Councillor Kavanaugh.
I just said that thank you. I appreciate your experience on this issue. Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Seeing no other questions, that the audit committee receive the audit report and recommend that council consider and approve the audit recommendations. Is that carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's and again, I'm pointing out that the Auditor General and her office have done this on a proactive basis. You know, Vice Chair mentioned all the risks that are involved, and so to mitigate those risks, I sure do appreciate that the proactive work to provide guidance or to provide comment on the way forward on this. Merci. Article numéro 3, report on the audit of Ottawa Community Housing's development and renewal plan. And this was provided to the Board of OCH prior to this meeting in January, I believe, at the end of January. There is no presentation, but I believe Councillor Kavanaugh, you wanted to hold this item.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask questions. Again, this is a going forward kind of report, because it's looking at a project with Ottawa Community Housing that hasn't been done before, of the scale for a long time. OCH had been more of a caretaker of the housing supply it had, and now it's going into building new housing supplies on a very big scale. So I think it was important to look at that, and I think the conclusion that I saw was that just board oversight was very important at different stages of the purchase. So I just want to say I appreciate the what was being done, because I think Ottawa Community Housing is being run very well. But I just wanted to get a sense if you sort of feel this is what the pattern is going forward, because of the ambitions, I guess, of Ottawa Community Housing and in supplying more affordable housing. Is this the intent, to look at what we're doing going forward to make sure that we have adequate affordable housing?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Chair. I believe if we're looking at what we anticipate OCH would be doing going forward, that question would likely be best directed to management. Any just specific questions with regards to the audit, I'd be happy to mention. But as you heard in our presentation at the OCH board back in January, what we did note is from a procurement perspective, we saw very good practices in place. We did make some recommendations, a thematic one actually, that we're seeing across some of our audits this past year with regards to conflict of interest declarations and just kind of beefing up that process a little bit. But we definitely made most of our recommendations were in the area of project management and strengthening their processes there and ensuring that they have a more mature process with a very lofty ambitions going forward over the next 10 years in their 10-year plan, as well as ensuring that they have the right resources in place, specifically staffing resources in order to achieve these goals. So I think we have management that might want to perhaps comment with regards to OCH's big task in the 10 years to come.
Thank you, Madam AG. And yes, Saeed, I see that you have come on the screen. Did you want to?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think management, and well, in this particular case, OCH sees management is in agreement with all of the auditor's recommendations on this. And I would just add that OCH and housing services have been scaling up quite a bit these last few years. So this is new territory for both OCH and us. So we are in full agreement with these recommendations as we move forward. We also invited Cliff Udale from OCH as well, in case he has anything to add to this.
Yeah, and I would just say, following suit, we're in agreement with the findings of the audit, and I think it was done at a good time for us. We're obviously ramping up the production of new housing, and this was in a transitionary phase. And I think over the course of the audit and subsequent to the audit, we've been adding staff, adding the resources and the capability that allows us to do a lot of the things that were called for in the audit. Very hard to do when you're running a pretty lean operation, trying to get your first couple large scale buildings done. But we're past that now, and I think most of these items identified in the audit will be done over the next 3-4 months and are part of good practice. So we're actually looking forward to getting the staff on board and getting that implemented as part of our development growth strategy. So no, all good.
Thank you. I appreciate the responses. I have to ask, here's Ottawa Community Housing, which is under the what is it called? The ownership of is through the City of Ottawa. But there's also other affordable housing out there, and we don't have even close to the monitoring and the opportunity to do an audit on what's going on there in terms of affordable housing. How are we monitoring other affordable housing to make sure that it's up to par?
Madam AG.
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Chair. I guess what I can state is we actually are doing an audit of affordable housing this year, but with regards to monitoring of housing, I'll leave that for management to respond to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the auditing of other affordable housing providers, usually the funding is provided by all three levels of government. So there are milestones and there is oversight in those cases. In some of these cases, I'm thinking of past projects. Some of our partners have been very large, sophisticated partners, such as the Pearly Rideau or Briere, for example. So who have undertaken larger projects in the past. And and a lot of the projects we're funding right now are with smaller providers, such as Shepherds of Good Hope, the Ottawa Mission, Cornerstone Housing for Women, and they would, we would expect that, they do have procurement practices and project management practices in place, sort of, in scale with the size of their own organization, but they wouldn't be undertaking, projects the same scale that OCH is undertaking.
Well, the recommendations in this report, does that sort of help in terms of guidelines for other projects as well from other developers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're looking at these recommendations very carefully, and as the auditor had pointed out, the affordable housing program is being audited this year. And because we've been scaling up, or we're looking to scale up considerably the amount of affordable housing that we're funding, we do need to evolve as well within housing services and the affordable housing branch itself. So we will be looking to implement new practices and build on those that we have already to ensure that there's proper oversight.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the work that's being done by the Auditor General on that topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. And yes, and just to pick up on your line of questioning, certainly as we've seen with in your ward and my ward, the relationship with respect to other providers, be they paragovernmental like Options Bytown or private developers, it certainly is an evolving thing. And Saeed, you and your team, thank you so much. You and I spoke a lot in the past year with respect to the Heron Gate project and your support of that MOU, but I think that's what Councillor Kavanagh is talking about, and I'll be interested to look at that other audit and the other work as to how those are implemented and executed. It's very important for everyone in our city. I saw Ms. Parr from the Office of the Auditor General turn on her camera. I don't know if she wanted to comment or if she was the no. Okay, thank you. Just want to give everyone the opportunity to provide input on this important subject. So item number 3, that the audit committee recommend council receive the report of the audit of Ottawa Community Housing's development and renewal plan. Is that carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. We're at the last item. Item number 4, verbal status update on the OAG's progress in reviewing outstanding recommendations from past audits. And I believe there is a presentation by the Auditor General on that.
Thank you very much, Chair. No presentation on this, just a quick verbal update. As requested in a previous meeting by Councillor DeRose, we wanted to provide a brief update on progress we have made in reviewing previously issued audit recommendations. We last reported to the Audit Committee on our progress in September of last year. Since then, we have reviewed an additional 40 recommendations to ensure management had adequately addressed them. Of those 40 recommendations, 38 were deemed to be adequately addressed, and 2 continue to be in an open status as we deemed further follow-up was warranted. We have also continued to work with management on a few significant audit files, including the audit of leases, as well as facilities management. For the leases audit, I am happy to report we are wrapping up the work on this file, and we'll have the results back to you in our semi-annual report that's scheduled to be tabled at our next audit committee. For the facilities management audit, I believe management has provided council with an update as to their progress in this area, and they've also kept us abreast of their progress over the past few months. We will be commencing our work on these particular recommendations this spring. Thank you very much. This concludes my verbal update. I'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Merci, Madame la Vérificatrice Générale.
Thank you, Madam Auditor General.
I guess everybody wants to know about what happened with the LRT audit investigation. And I realize that the provincial one is taking priority, but is it still is it still alive, or has it been shelved completely?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. Chair, so as of right now, the audit is on pause. Deputy Auditor General Joanne Gorenstein and I had the pleasure of meeting with the two co-lead councils for the public inquiry back in January, I believe now. And so we were able to provide them a little bit of context as to what we were going to look at. Right now, the mandate that has been provided to the commissioner really does cover off all of the items with regards to the motion that was requested by council of my office. So at this point, we're on hold until we can either get a little bit more information from the co-leads with regards to whether or not they anticipate covering the entire scope, and if so, how deep they anticipate going into that scope. Right now, I don't want to repeat work that is being done. I don't think that's appropriate use of taxpayer dollars, since I think technically the city would be hit twice on that particular item, both from a provincial standpoint and then again from a city standpoint. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern in order to see what it is that they're going to come forward with. My hopes is that we'll touch base with them again in the next couple of months. But as of right now, we're keeping things on hold.
Well, could it be that if they tick off all the boxes that you were going to do, the public inquiry, then you would recommend that not to go forward? Is that possible?
Chair, yes, that would be my recommendation from that perspective, is that if I don't see my office adding any value, there's no purpose in us continuing with that audit.
Okay, and that wouldn't be till August when it concludes, obviously.
Absolutely, unless the co-leads are able to provide us additional information that can really solidify my position as of right now, unless they give us any indication that they will not be covering the entirety of their mandate, I do not see why we would move forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Seeing no other questions, going once, going twice, seeing no other questions, there is no recommendation here. Merci, Madame la Vérificatrice Générale.
Thank you, Madame Auditor General.
For that update and for all your work today. That completes our agenda. There are no in-camera items. Any notices of motions? Any inquiries? Any other business? I would advise that there is a media availability 15 minutes after this meeting. Let's say 11:15, 11h15, 11:15 media availability. And the next meeting is scheduled tentatively for April 26th. Please make a note of that in your calendars. The notice of meeting will be circulated a little bit closer to that meeting date, but we are aiming for April 26th, 2022. And a motion to adjourn, please, Madam Vice Chair.
I move that the Audit Committee of February the 22nd, 2022 be adjourned.
And is that carried?
Carried.
Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.